What's up everyone, Zach Nusser here bringing you another training science video. And today we're going to discuss the relationship between muscle damage and muscle growth or hypertrophy. So it's long been assumed that muscle damage was a direct driver of muscle growth, suggesting that in order to make the most muscle gains possible, it was necessary to actively seek as much muscle damage as possible, without injury of course. In recent years, however, we've started to unlock a better picture of what causes hypertrophy, as well as its relationship to muscle damage. A growing number of people are starting to think differently about muscle damage and its effects on muscle growth. One of the most important studies in contributing to this paradigm shift was a 2016 study by Damas et al., which examines the correlation between muscle damage and hypertrophy. So if you'd like to comb through the study a little bit more in depth, then I'll leave the link in the description down below, but I'll quickly cover the basics so we can discuss the implications of the results. We know from past research that muscle protein synthesis is directly related to muscle hypertrophy. So this study set out to determine whether or not increasing muscle protein synthesis by eliciting more muscle damage resulted in greater hypertrophy. So first of all, muscle protein synthesis, or MPS, is defined as the rate in which new proteins are added to muscle, which is thought to occur during muscle growth and muscle repair. Now, moving on, the subjects in the study were 10 young males who had exercised before but were currently untrained. Now the subjects performed the leg press and the leg extension twice per week for 10 weeks. Biopsies were performed where very small portions of about 100 milligrams of muscle were surgically removed from the thigh immediately before, 1 day, and 2 days after the first training session, during a week 3 session, and at the last session in week 10. These muscle samples were used to examine individual muscle fiber cross-sectional area and MPS, again muscle protein synthesis, as well as the damage to the muscle caused by training. Now they also took indirect measures of muscle damage, including a subjective rating of soreness on a scale of 1 to 100, creatine kinase, which is a blood marker that often indicates muscle damage, and maximum isometric voluntary contractile strength, which you can just think of as muscle strength, which tends to decline when muscle damage is high. They also directly assessed the biopsies for muscle damage via microscope. So what were the findings? Well, the researchers found that MPS was higher after the initial training session and had decreased by the 3-week mark, where it then stabilized for the remainder of the study. Importantly, when MPS related to muscle damage was corrected for, MPS was pretty much the same throughout the entire study. So what did the researchers find in regards to muscle damage? Muscle soreness peaked about 48 hours after the initial exercise bout. In weeks 3 and 10, soreness remained very low at all times. This suggests that muscle damage was highest after the first session and significantly dropped throughout the remainder of the study. Creatine kinase levels in week 1 were the highest, significantly dropping by week 3 and continuing to drop up to and through week 10, another indicator that muscle damage decreased early on and remained fairly low. Maximum voluntary contractile strength, again muscle strength, decreased by a whopping 22% 1 to 2 days after the initial training session, and then by only 2 to 6% after sessions in week 3 and 10. Since muscle damage directly impacts muscle strength, this is further evidence of the decrease in muscle damage over time. Finally, direct measurements of Z-band streaming showed the highest muscle damage after the first training session, decreasing dramatically by weeks 3 and 10. This is the final nail in the coffin, confirming that muscle damage does indeed peak early in a new training program, but drops significantly by the 3rd week. This also supports the concept of the repeated bout effect, where muscles become more resilient to damage when repeating the same stressful movement patterns over time. So what did this study find in regards to actual muscle hypertrophy? Well, for starters, muscle fiber hypertrophy was only measurable in week 10, where it was up about 14% from baseline, potentially suggesting that muscle growth didn't occur to a significant degree early on when muscle damage was high, but increased later on in the study where muscle damage was low. Hypertrophy had no relationship with any marker of muscle damage, direct or indirect, at any time point. Hypertrophy also had no relationship to muscle protein synthesis after the initial training bout, likely due to the prioritization of muscle repair instead of muscle growth. Muscle fiber hypertrophy did, however, have a strong relationship with MPS at week 10, likely due to reduced muscle damage thanks to the repeated bout effect. So it appeared that based on this study and other recent studies, that muscle damage is more of a side effect of strength and hypertrophy training, and that it might not actually be ideal to intentionally seek out the most muscle damage possible, which is often done through highly damaging training methods like an exaggerated focus on eccentric contractions or slow negatives, where one focuses more on the descent of the weight instead of the concentric contraction or the actual lifting of the weight. It also appears that in the presence of excessive muscle damage, the body prioritizes repair instead of supercompensation, which can hinder the process of progressive overload, which is thought to be the primary driver of hypertrophy. All in all, guys, it seems that one should ease into a new training routine and then focus on progressive overload for strength and hypertrophy gains instead of actively trying to damage the muscle, which likely has little to no benefit and may actually hinder strength and muscle gains. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date on everything fitness. Leave any questions and comments you have in the comment section down below. Follow me on social media, and I'll see you guys next time.